Hey everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to Sports on the Positive Tip, where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. And of course, I'll be joined by Kenny Squared in just a bit. Today, we are going to talk about the hunt for October. Wake us both up if this isn't real with the Jets and Giants. The Knicks opening up against Memphis. And I bet Kenny hasn't heard of Gene Tenace, have you? We'll talk about it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. This is Sports on the Positive Tip, where we are going to have a conversation at the intersection of sports and faith. So this is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
And so I'm just ready to dive right in, Kenny. It is so much going on. This is just an unbelievable time of year. Hockey has started as well, and the Rangers look like title contenders this year. But I gotta tell you, today we're gonna probably mostly talk about baseball, because that is obviously we're in the hunt for October. We certainly are gonna talk about what a great time it is right now to be a New York football fan. Don't wake me up, by the way. If I'm dreaming, let me stay asleep on the Jets and Giants here. We're gonna talk a little NBA because that kicked off. We never really gave ourselves a preview. We can talk some Knicks, and then I'm gonna ask you a little bit about for inspiration. And if you have something for inspiration, that's great too. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about someone named Gene Tenace, and we can chat about that. But first, hey, let's start with baseball, and we'll work backwards here, right? Let's start with the championship series. We weren't on last week, so we didn't get a chance to really put a fork in the Mets, the Braves, and the Dodgers. Unbelievable 100 win teams that are now home watching this all unfold. But we are at the championship series now. And why don't we start, because I want to spend some time on Yankees Astros. So why don't we start with the Padres and Phillies? Obviously, two teams that I don't think anybody predicted that they would be here, right? Did you predict Phillies Padres? You didn't, right?
Nah. It's interesting, though, because this is the first ever matchup of two NLCS teams with under 90 wins in the regular season.
Wow.
So a lot of chaos going on in the National League.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, let's look at the series first, and then we're going to work backwards and how these teams got here. Who do you think has the edge? I mean, so far, we had the game one where, yes, Zach Wheeler – someone the Mets should not have let. Now, remember, that's not second guessing. Remember when the Phillies signed him, I was not happy. I was like, come on, the Mets couldn't afford that, because the Phillies didn't give him this like $300 million contract. You know, he signed for something. I think he signed like 5 years, $85 million or something like that. But Steve Cohen hadn't owned the team yet, and I just felt like all the Mets had invested in Zach Wheeler, this goes back now a little bit, but you know who they traded for Zach Wheeler to get him from the Giants minor league organization?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I should know this.
Yeah, he's one of your announcers, Mr. Carlos Beltran.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so that was the year of the purge when Terry Collins first came in, and Jose Reyes and Carlos Beltran. He went at the trade deadline. They got Zach Wheeler, and they invested a lot in him because he had Tommy John, and he was just coming around. So his performance the other day really didn't surprise me. He's always had just great stuff. And so, and then last night, the Padres bats wake up. The Phillies bats did well as well, but the big boys for the Padres wake up with Machado and Brandon Drury, Josh Bell. And I think I had said that was my concern with Padres Mets. If the Padres wake up, they're just such a dangerous team, and they've got three excellent starters to go out there. So what's your take here on the first couple of games of the National League Championship Series, and how do you see this series starting to play out?
Well, I think first of all, it's going to be a fun series. I think that's kind of been shown in these first couple of games, because both of them, like, sometimes you get to championship series and it's like such a weird lopsided matchup, but I think both are pretty evenly matched. And I think that's really exciting for baseball. I'm getting a couple teams too that haven't been at all in the playoffs in a while. Like the Phillies hadn't been since 2011. The Padres, aside from 2020, which is kind of a weird year anyway, They haven't been in since 2006 and at home game since 2006.
Mm.
So I think that's a cool, like a really cool factor to watch. I give the edge slightly to San Diego. I think this is going 6 or 7. Um, I think the Padres, first of all, their bullpen is a lot more secure, especially now that Josh Hader looks a little bit more like Josh Hader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think also eventually, like, I think the Phillies have better pitchers overall in Nola and Wheeler, but I think the Padres have a little bit more depth. And especially now in a very unique year where you're going to have, after they have the off day today, but then the next 5 days are going to be LCS days if they're necessary.
Yeah.
So that's really where pitching depth is really going to come into play here. And it's going to be very interesting to see how really all 4 teams kind of navigate it. Because usually, like, your typical postseason rotation is you go with 4 guys, possibly 3 guys, depending on what your outcomes look like, or if you're winning or losing or anything like that. But you might have to go 5 deep, and that's going to be interesting to see. Like, where does Yu Darvish fit in there? How is Blake Snell following up? Things like that. So I think it's still going to be the Padres, because also the Phillies bullpen, they've been good, but I still don't trust them overall. So
Yeah, they've been surprisingly good. Yeah, I agree with you. I want to get on that point that you just said about the way the schedule is shaking out. I thought that, and I'll tie this in a second. I thought that Rob Thompson should have stuck with Zach Wheeler one more inning. He was just dealing. It worked out because Sir Anthony comes in, and man, it seems like everybody's throwing over 100 miles an hour, this now. But he comes in and he does great in the 8th. And then, they took a chance with Jose there in the 9th inning, because I've seen him enough against the Mets. He can be either very, very good or very bad. And he obviously had a couple of runners on in that first game, but I would have went with Wheeler in the 8th and then Sir Anthony in the 9th. But it worked out for them. But I was telling you yesterday, I hadn't seen, we'll get to the Yankees in just a few seconds, but I hadn't seen the over managing too much yet in these playoffs. And is that because you think of the schedule, and they know that, hey man, I can't be running all these pitchers out here every inning because I'm going to need them for the long run? It kind of backfired on the Guardians.
yeah, I think that's probably a little bit of a factor. Um, I guess it all depends on kind of the makeup of your team.
Yeah.
There was a couple times Dave Roberts still kind of overmanaged. I think that's part of the reason why they're not playing right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's probably part of it, because like you're looking, say, at a guy like Wandy Peralta for the Yankees. Now,
Right.
first of all, he became the first Yankee ever to pitch in all 5 games of a division series. So kudos to him.
Yeah.
But also, you look at the next like set here after game 2, you gotta have to kind of play. You gotta play your lanes good, because you don't want to burn them out. Because also, what ends up happening, it seems like every year for the Yankees, is you get to like game 6 and 7 in the LCS, and someone's tired and someone gives up a home run just because they've been overused.
Right.
I mean, it happened to Chapman a couple times. It's happened to Zach Britton. I mean, it happens to a lot of guys in general. I think of the 2016 World Series where Andrew Miller was amazing, but looked awful in game 7.
Yeah.
Aroldis Chapman was really good and also gave up a huge home run. So I think also, if you're looking at it from there, it's like, yeah, there are some games where you just got to hope that your team can come back, and you got to avoid your big guns.
Yeah.
Save them for another day.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So interesting. So I think that's going to shape up to be a really good series. I agree with you. I think these teams are very evenly matched. They both have a couple of big stars, right? Kyle Schwarber, oh my gosh, with that home run he hit, was it 448 feet? And obviously Bryce Harper is this is his moment now, because he didn't get a shot with the Nationals. So this is his moment really to shine. And of course you have Machado and Juan Soto with the Padres. So I think this is going to be a really, really good series. And I could go either way. I'll go with you though. The Phils may have the edge here, but we'll see. But now let's dive into Yankees Astros. We'll come back to and put a fork in the Dodgers, Braves, and the Mets in a few seconds. But I think that the Yankees obviously a very, very tough series with the Guardians. I think they showed everybody something to come out of that series after being down 2 games to 1 and then losing that, game 3 in excruciating fashion, with 3 runs in the bottom of the ninth inning. That was the momentum obviously was all Guardians at that point. So for the Yankees to come out and win those next 2 games, I think it really showed a lot of toughness on their part. But now here you have the 108, I think, or 106 win Astros, and who've been here before, who, you and I want to root for Dusty Baker. We just can't right here because I'm a New York fan. So I'm all in on the Yankees on this. And, but the Astros, man, are good. And it's amazing how they lose player after player. And they have these guys that come up and take their place that look like they're going to be just as good. And Justin Verlander comes out game 1, and boy, oh boy, is he good. And he's probably going to win the Cy Young again, Cy Young Award again this year. So take us through what you felt here in game 1 and how critical is tonight to you.
Yeah, well, game 1 was going to be tough anyway because you're talking like the Yankees travel situation has been so bizarre, and then they played the late afternoon game yesterday and then celebrated and then traveled to Houston. So there's a lot of it's a bunch of different factors there. Justin Verlander just is really, really good. But I think tonight is pretty important. I think Severino is going to bring it because he seems to rise to the occasion pretty well.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest factors for the Yankees, though, is their starting pitching. The starters need to go give them length. Also, we talked about overmanaging. I think Boone overmanaged a little bit by taking out Tyone.
Yeah.
He had, I think it was 67 pitches in 4 and change. And at that point, I understand that you don't want to give up a big inning there, but he didn't really look that bad. And Clark Schmidt, I don't know, I love his stuff. It just seems like they keep putting him in situations that don't necessarily fit him.
Yeah.
He's not really the reliever type. He was the guy that came in and kind of blew the lead in game 3 against the Guardians. It kind of seems like he's not the best suited for that high leverage, I need to get 1 out type of guy. Yeah. It worked out in the end because he got a big double play. But I think when I'm looking at those type of situations where you need a guy to kill a rally in the 5th inning, I would more rather go with a guy like Lou Trevino, maybe Jonathan Loaizaga, depending on who's up, kind of getting one of your more consistent relievers like that.
Yeah.
And then bringing in a Clark Schmidt in a clean inning. I think that's probably the better lane for him, but I don't know if they're going to do that or not.
Yeah.
Also the Yankees with the bullpen with 5 different injuries and guys are still not fully back. That's going to probably play a factor in how Boone manages them. But I think really the Yankees' key is getting to these guys early and having your starter lock them down for at least 6.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I've heard and I've kind of seen a little bit, but saw a lot last night, the Astros bullpen's really good.
They are.
Your boy Montero is, although the Yankees almost got to him.
They did. Yeah. Yeah.
It was, they're really good.
Yeah.
And it's going to be tough to win games in the last out. The home runs are going to come. A new call for John Sterling last night, Darth Bader. He hit another home run.
Darth Bader. That's funny.
So,
Harrison
that's
Bader,
a good one.
Listen, so now that's turning out to be an even trade because we flipped out when they traded Jordan Montgomery. And I told you didn't know that much about Harrison Bader. I told you he's a very good player. But his defense stood out more for me in his days with the Cardinals. But he's got a lot of power because he's a pretty built, strong young man. And I want to go back to what you said about the Yankee starters real quick. I loved how Garrett Cole. Listen, we've killed him here a little bit, a few times, but I gotta say, man, he rose to the occasion. I loved what he did in Game 4. That's exactly what you want to see your ace do. And we saw all over the early parts of these playoffs, aces just not do it. Not just the Met aces, but the Brave aces too. That just didn't rise to the occasion and give you seven tough innings, six or seven really tough innings. We've seen Hugh Darvish do it. We've seen Blake Snell hang in there. Not so much yesterday, but um, earlier against the Mets, he hung in. So I think that is such a key. Nestor Cortez in that Game 5. I mean, it was like he had been there a lot of times before. You couldn't tell. I mean, the guy was cool as the other side of the pillow, as Stuart Scott used to say. And so I think that it's got to be the Yankees starters. Tell me if you're feeling this. I don't think the Yankees are going to out home run the Astros in this series. The Astros have players that have a lot of pop. I mean, you had Rizzo, certainly last night getting one out, and Bader, but I just don't think that even with Judge, you're just not going to out homer the Astros. They've got 6 or 7 guys that hit 20, 30 home runs, and so I think you hit it on the head. It's got to be the starters, and it's got to go deep. And if then Boone has the opportunity to use his bullpen the way he's used it in the regular season, you know, uh, pick your choice of Loizaga or Peralta in the 7th and 8th, and then you get to Holmes in the 9th. I think then that's their formula for success. What do you think?
Yeah, I would fully agree.
Yeah,
I feel like that's when, especially you saw it in Game 4 against the Guardians, which I didn't point this out. I was there. It was quite
yep.
the electric atmosphere.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah,
but really, like, being able to get 6 from your starter and then go Loizaga, Peralta, Holmes, depending on matchups, you can
yeah,
kind of mix and match them there. I think really that's the formula for success.
yeah,
If you can get more than that from your starter, great, because
yeah,
then you can kind of take a little bit of the burden off of those guys.
yeah,
But really, like, anybody outside of those 3,
yeah,
it's kind of a little hit and miss.
yeah, yeah.
I would maybe add Trevino in there because Lou Trevino has been pretty good, but I don't know. Like, Clark Schmidt's been okay. Miguel Castro, he pitched last night. He was fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Montas, kind of his role is probably what he did yesterday, like coming in either in a big lead or losing situation to eat a couple innings. The biggest thing I don't understand is, like, Domingo Herman has been excellent this year. He has not played
Why is
at
he
all.
not pitching? Yeah, I was wondering why is he not pitching?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Because, like, to me, I would rather go to him than Clark Schmidt in that type of a situation
yeah,
last night.
yeah,
Because he has also, like, kind of some hit and miss stuff.
yeah,
Because, like, this Astros team, like, I think one of the biggest things, and I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, they're doing this, and Jose Altuve has looked dreadful at the plate. I think
yeah.
he's 0 for 18, 0 for
And
19.
he's Mr. October, one of our modern Mr. Octobers here.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I listen. So I think it's a must win tonight. I think the Yankees come back home, one game apiece, take away that home field advantage a little bit, and then you got 3 games in the stadium here. I think they got their opportunity. I do think the Yankees match up well with the Astros. I really do. I mean, this is a tough team, man. But the Yankees are a tough team too. I'll say this last thing. Gleyber Torres, he's been one of my favorite players. He's got to step up here, because it can't just be, Judge, Rizzo, and Bader. They need one more, and he's got to be that one more. I mean, he had an excellent, I thought, regular season. He's got to step it up here. That's still one of the best trades of all time. How the Yankees got him and then got Chapman back. Let's go backwards just for a few seconds. I'll just ask you, because it'll take me a little bit more time. I won't do it today to wrap up the Mets season. I'll just say that I'm very, very, very proud of their season. I'm very, very, very disappointed how it ended. But I think we've turned a corner here in the culture of the Mets. and I like. I don't agree with some of the moves. I had a lot of faith in Buck, but some of the moves he made in the postseason, I could have, did without, or I think most fans could have. But why do you think that these three teams are now home? The Dodgers won 111 games. Both the Braves and Mets won 101 games, and I just I think the big head scratcher for me, I sent you a message on this, was how they lost to the Phillies, the Braves. It was more of a head scratcher than the Padres beating the Mets, because I felt like the Braves were primed here to at least get back to the World Series. They had owned the Phillies not just this past year, but for the last like 4 or 5 years. I mean, they have just beaten the Phillies up, all over the place. And we always have that factor about, which is one of the reasons I think the Dodgers are out, that when you play those important games in September, it gets you ready for the postseason more than anything else. And thus the Padres and Phillies, right? Because they played important games every day. But so did the Braves and so did the Mets. And so that puzzled me. And you could put the Braves pitching in a short series and put that right up against the Mets pitching in a short series and say, you know what? It's relatively equal. Yet they still lost to the Phillies. That one was a head scratcher for me. So why those three teams home, Kenny?
I feel like some people, well, obviously I can't really say the same with the Mets, but specifically the Dodgers and the Braves, some people point to, oh, well, they had 5 days off.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
know who else had 5 days off was the Astros.
Yep.
And they ended up sweeping the
Yeah.
Mariners.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Yankees had a few days off and they had a gritty 5 game series.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, the layoff could hurt people, but I think more than anything, um, I think the Phillies and I would say both the Phillies and the Padres are teams that just really they got hot at the right time here.
Yeah.
Because I know the Phillies, they didn't have the best overall record, but they also had a lot of injuries throughout the year. Like Bryce Harper wasn't fully healthy. Castellanos, I know, had some injuries here and there. And also, like you look at, oh gosh, what was that number? I think 21 and 29 is what they started. And they're one of like four teams to make the LCS.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is like, I love the guy so much. I think he's a great manager, but it seemed like Joe Girardi kind of lost that locker room.
Oh, no question. Yeah. No question. No question. I think that's pretty clear. Um, it's still a little bit of a head scratcher. I do think that the Dodgers, a little bit of overconfidence, because they also, remember the last couple of years, oh, Dodgers Padres, it's going to be a big rivalry. Well, they won the division by 18 games, I think, right? 18 or 19 games. That it wasn't much of a rivalry. They've kind of owned the Padres these last few years, which even made it more of a head scratcher. But the Dodgers didn't play an important game all year, So I think that was definitely a factor. And then getting the 5 days off and getting their team healthy. I know they had some injuries, and I know they missed Gosselin, but even without Gosselin, they still won 111 games. And it's just hard to believe that they lost in the division series, after winning 111 games. And I just think, listen, if you look biblically, man, the underdog wins a lot of times. I mean, David against Goliath, and we can go on, right? Elijah. I mean, there's a lot of times where the underdog just rises up and there's no particular rhyme or reason why they win. And I think we saw that here in the National League. But I like your analogy with the Astros, because the Mariners were definitely upstarts and they were definitely ready. And the Mariners are going to kick themselves all offseason that they blew that game one, right? Taking a 3-run lead into the ninth inning, and they blew that game one.
Yeah.
And how many chances did they have in that 18-inning game, to at least get a run on the board, and they didn't, So, but the Astros took care of business. So the Braves, the Dodgers, and the Mets didn't. And so, thus they're home. This is going to be so exciting, man. I'm so pumped up. I'd love to see the Yankees get back to the World Series, and either a matchup of, what is it, 2009 or 1998, right? Or was it 98
Yep.
that they played the Padres? And I remember getting you out of bed. Mommy told me to get you out of bed so you could see the last few outs of Game 4. The Yankees swept the Padres that year. And it's gonna be fun. This is gonna be a fun next few
Yeah.
days. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so I think what's really interesting too is you'd mentioned the big superstars. Bryce Harper has never been to an LCS.
Right.
Manny Machado, I think he has, but like he definitely
With the
wasn't like
Dodgers. Yeah.
the star.
Yeah.
And I think whoever wins, obviously, it'll be really fun to kind of see them on the biggest stage. Because like this is what we had been hoping for years with Mike Trout. And now like his contemporary, like the guy that's always being compared to in Bryce Harper is finally there. Or even Manny Machado, who I think is like one of those really, really good guy, like really good players that continues to be a little underrated. So it'll be
Yep.
fun. And hopefully that is against the Yankees. I think honestly, most of America is hoping, and probably baseball too for the ratings, because
Well,
I don't think
yeah.
anyone wants to see the Astros in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. The baseball doesn't really talk about the ratings anymore. I mean, this was the time of year where, forget it. The baseball just ruled. I mean, shows would push their fall, previews back, because the World Series would be on. But those days are a little bit gone. And you know why? One of the reasons why they're a little bit gone because the popularity of football, and so we don't have to spend a ton of time on it. I just got to ask you one question. Is this really happening? Are the Jets really 3-2 and the Giants really 5-1? I just I'm just I don't know, man. Is it 3-2 or 4-2? The Jets. The Jets are 4-2, right? Because
Yeah, I think they're 4-2. Hold
they both
on.
played 6 games, right? Yeah. I mean, tell me, you and I
Yeah.
talked a lot about culture and the culture of teams, right? And it just seems like for the Jets, it hasn't been overnight. I think that this coach has really now in this last year and change that he's been there has really tried to change the culture. But I was talking about this with someone on Sunday, the amazing, amazing job they did in this draft. I mean, I can't believe I mean, their running back Hall, man, he looks like he's been in the NFL for like 10 years. I mean, you give him the ball in any big down, third down and 8, you just get him the ball, he just finds a hole. He's been like that all year. And now you finally see Gardner out there. But the drafting in the last few years, I mean, you can't go wrong with getting some of these guys from Alabama and LSU, in there. You just see that so the CJ Mosleys and the Quentin Williams, they're now really coming into their own. Their defense just gave Aaron Rodgers fits. And so finally the Jets have these playmakers that are coming into their own. And guess what now? The quarterback is developing and he's developing into a player. I had no idea he was as mobile as he is. He's seeing the field better. He's slowly developing into a really solid NFL quarterback. I don't know that he's going to be a great quarterback. He might, but man, oh man, I just, it's really good to see. What's your take though on the Giants? I mean, I'm just the way they beat the Ravens coming from behind. I mean, those were games that when they were good in Eli's last couple of years, those were games that they were losing, man, right at the end. I mean, they'd hang right in there, hang right in there. I remember a game like that against Carolina, where they hung right in there, and it wasn't Eli's last year, it was maybe his next to last year. But what's your take on the Giants?
Well, you had mentioned culture, and I'll kind of piggyback on what you had said with the Jets. I kind of thought it was very funny when he's talking about, oh, we're keeping receipts. But maybe that was one of those lines where really like the team
Yeah,
said, like, hey,
yeah,
this guy actually has our back. He's not just here, like, hey, we're
yeah,
trying our best out there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, so far, I mean, they're 4-2. Like, they're in second, like, both the New York teams right now are in second place
Yeah.
behind the Eagles, who people thought would be good, and the Bills, who people thought would be good. So, like, where they are is really impressive. And I think with the Giants, it's all about the culture and the coaching. I mean, Daniel Jones has looked pretty good. I think also a big factor Saquon Barkley has been healthy and has been really, really good.
Yes.
Because like people would look at it like, oh well, Daniel Jones is 5-1. Yes, but I wouldn't say that all 5 wins are because he made these amazing plays. But like I do look at the last few years, and games like this they would easily lose. I look back, I think against Tampa Bay, they had a pretty significant lead and blew it.
Yeah.
I think of
Yeah.
Kansas City on Monday night. They had the lead
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
blew it.
Absolutely.
Um, but it seems like they're winning these close games now, which obviously is going to make a huge difference. But then also, like, you look at the upcoming schedule, the Giants are playing Jacksonville this week, and the Jets are playing Denver. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at the beginning of the
Winnable
season, you're like,
game.
well, Trevor Lawrence, another year.
Yeah.
Like,
Those are
yeah,
winnable
both
games
of them,
though.
I think, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, like, could we really be talking about like the 6-1 and the 5-2 New York teams here? And then add in Buffalo since they technically play in
Oh,
New York. Like
what
that's
a game that
crazy.
was. Yeah, that was just my sweet spot, Kenny, right? Give me any day of the week. Sunday night football is good. Monday night football is good. Thursday night football, not so much. But
Yeah.
give me a big 425 game that I have no rooting interest in, and just let me sit back and enjoy the game. And that was Sunday, man. The Bills and Chiefs, what a game that was. But um, I just this coach in the Giants. I mean, where was he? I mean, why didn't other teams give him a shot? I mean, he just seems to have a touch with these players that it's hard to describe really, right? Watch for us watching it on TV, but the way this team seems to respond to him and his whole coaching staff, it's it's so different than these last maybe 5-6 years, and probably even longer than that if you throw in Ben McAdoo. We're not going to knock the previous three coaches, but boy oh
Oof.
boy, you could just see the difference in the way the players respond to him.
Yeah, it seems like he's a lot more relatable.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know if you've seen any of like the post game stuff where he's like just as fired up as the players. Like he looks like he's like a linebacker that
Yeah.
just like sacked the quarterback. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just as excited, and I think that's a huge factor too.
Yeah.
Um, and you'd mentioned the Jets with drafting. The Giants have drafted pretty well too.
I
Thibodeau's looked really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um, maybe they actually have kind of figured out the offensive line a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and also like their high paying receivers, the guys that they were supposed to rely on, like they haven't been really at all a factor.
Is that surprising you?
I mean, yes and no. Because last year they were awful,
Yeah.
but I think maybe it's not their strength.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of it too, is like playing to your strengths and kind of knowing who you are.
Yeah.
Which there's a lot of biblical truths in there too, where like
Yeah.
it's all about like finding what your identity is. And really the Giants' identity is like the offense runs through Saquon Barkley. And then hopefully if you need to make a couple of big plays, you do the passing game, and then the defense holds until you win.
Yeah. I tell you, I think often also of Mike Tomlin and the culture that the Steelers had for a lot of years. And while they haven't been great the last few years, it just seems like that team always stays together, and anytime there's someone that goes against that culture, no matter how good they are, whether it's Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, they seem to be out of there. And you think about how Paul was very specific, right, with all of the way he built those churches. There were very specific guidelines on how you blend in these churches, right? Whether it's you have a problem with someone, you go right to them. There shouldn't be any rifts within. He was very specific on the culture that he knew would get people closer to God, and you just see that, with both the Jets and Giants, and it's so different from the last several years. And I thought that, aside from Adam Gase, right? I thought that several of the Jet coaches over the years were not bad in terms of building. I think they just didn't have the playmakers, that now they have. But now you add a coach that's, positive, pumped up, no matter what. If they make a bad play, you see him coming off the field, you see him going over, patting them and saying, it's okay, you get it next time. And it's amazing to see. It really is. I'll give you a really, really quick example. You probably saw the highlight of Robbie Anderson, who I never wanted the Jets to get rid of. He's such a good player, big game receiver, right? Robbie Anderson. Don't throw him like a 10-yard pass. Throw him a 40-yard pass, and you always saw him do his work. But he gets into a dispute with the coaches. The coaches start arguing. They kick him out of the game. I mean, they escort him off the field. I mean, the team kicks him out of the game, not the refs or anything like that. And now you say, okay, who does he play with now? He plays with Carolina. And is Carolina doing well? No, they're not. And that was a game that they started off beating the Rams, and they just imploded. And so there's something off with the culture there. They fire the coach who got hired the same time as the Jets coach did, and he's gone. And so it's culture, man. It really is.
Well, he got traded too, right?
He got traded, Anderson. I didn't know that they traded him. Who did they trade him?
They traded him the next day. They traded him the next day to the Cardinals.
They traded him the next day. Oh my gosh. Well, maybe they are trying to change the culture then. That I did not know that. Wow. That's amazing. Listen, I don't want to wake up from this dream, So, hey, let's do two other quick things if that's okay.
Yeah.
I know you haven't watched much NBA. The Warriors came out and smoked the Lakers on Tuesday night. We could talk more next week. I just don't know what the Lakers have. It's going to be really interesting as the season unfolds. But the Warriors are still formidable. Celtics beat the Sixers on opening night. Tough game, close game. But I have to admit, I cheated a lot last night. I really went back and forth. And once the Knicks made the comeback, so the Knicks were down by 19 in the third quarter. Memphis is good. Oh my gosh, they're a good team. They picked up a couple of other pieces as well. They're even better than they were last year. But I got to tell you, man, I was I'm very hopeful on the Knicks, and we could do a deeper preview next week. But I watched a lot of that game, especially when I saw they started coming back. And we've seen that story before play out over the several years, right? Knicks make this big comeback and they fall short. This time they made the big comeback and they went ahead. And so they're down by 19 points like early in the third quarter, and they just chip away. And I loved how Jalen Brunson looked. I loved how Julius Randle looked in this offense. He's not slowing it down. He's getting the ball and he's moving, and Brunson is finding him in good spots. But Cam Reddish, oh my gosh, you got to play this guy. He's got all-world talent. He hit the big three-pointer with 3 seconds left last night. I don't know if you saw the highlights on that. He moved from one side all the way to another. Brunson found him. He rises up and nothing but net on this three-pointer to tie it up, and that's how it went into overtime. And they just outlasted them. And Ja Morant is just unbelievable. I think he might be an MVP candidate this year based on what I see. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Knicks. Just briefly on what you know now, at least of the roster, what's your hope on the Knicks? Are you thinking they will be absolutely in the playoffs? Because the Eastern Conference has gotten very, very, very difficult.
I would love to say yes, but like you said, I think the East is so deep that to me, what would be a big step forward is at least getting to the playing game. Because I'm going to list off a few teams here. The Celtics.
Yeah.
You got the Cavs, the Heat, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Bucks. That's 6 teams right there. I don't think the Knicks are necessarily better than any of those 6 teams.
Yeah.
But you never know. I was talking with somebody yesterday about the Nets and how the Nets could be really good if they're sane. Milwaukee, if Milwaukee suffers a big injury, you don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the Cavs have a really deep team, but is everyone going to gel well together?
Yeah.
The Celtics, are they going to be fine without their head coach for the year? Is that going to loom over their heads?
Yeah.
So there are some still question marks with a lot of the teams in the East, but I think for the Knicks, a huge goal would be let's get to the play-in and kind of see what happens from there.
Okay. Okay.
I think from there you can kind of build and also like add a couple pieces. I think the biggest thing is got to develop these young guys.
Yeah.
Like
Let
Cam
them
Reddish
play.
barely played last year.
Yeah.
Like let this guy play.
Let them
Obi
play.
Toppin, let him go.
Yeah.
Let them go loose.
Yeah. Let them play. I'm totally with that. Uh, and Quentin Grimes was out last night, which is why Reddish played a lot, and then he just kept him in there when he was playing so well. And so let him play, let Quickly play. I agree with you, Toppin. Let's see these guys develop. Now the guy they picked up from the Clippers, the center, he played more than Mitchell Robinson did last night. He played extremely well. So
Oh, Markkinen.
yeah, yeah. No, his last, yeah. Is that his name? I'm forgetting his name. It's Stein or Steen.
Oh no, Hartenstein.
Hartenstein. Yeah.
Hartenstein.
Is it Isaiah's his first name? I think. Yeah, but
Yeah.
he played extremely well last night too. We'll talk more NBA next week. Let's get to our inspiration if that's okay. I'll I'll shoot mine,
Yep.
you always have something up your sleeve. Um, I asked you, did you know Gene Tenace? You think he's a tennis player? That's funny. um, Gene Tenace was the most valuable player of the 1972 World Series. And the 1972 World Series, by the way, still holds a couple of distinctions. I think it's still the only World Series that it went 7 games. The A's beat the Reds. And it's still, I think, the only World Series where all 7 games was decided by 1 run. All 7 games was decided by 1 run. And I think Raleigh Fingers is still the only reliever to pitch in all 7 games. So he came in all 7 games. But anyway, Gene Tenace was the MVP. I'm going to read you his stats. He had a great series. He had 23 at bats. He had 8 hits, 4 home runs, and 9 RBIs. So he had a phenomenal World Series. In the regular season, he had only 82 at bats. He had 5 homers, 32 RBIs, which I think is pretty good for 82 at bats, but he batted 225. And Gene Tenace went on to have a so-so career. He stayed with the A's for several more years, and he wound up with the Cardinals for a few years, and I think with the Pirates to end his career. I think he was an all-star once. I want to say in 75 with the A's, he was an all-star. But the thing is that their main catcher got hurt, and he got called upon at the last second, to start game 1, and out of nowhere, he tears it up. He rises above, and people interviewed him a lot over the years, and he said that he just knew that he was on the big stage and he wanted to prove himself because he wanted to be a starting catcher, and he was a starter for several years. I think he also played with the Padres, I want to say, and after that, and it was because of that big World Series, and without him, there's no way the A's would have won. But here's the thing: the A's back then had Reggie Jackson, they had Sal Bando, they had Bert Campaneris. These are names that might be familiar to you, particularly Reggie Jackson. Obviously, had those great years with the Yankees as well. But here it is, Gene Tenace, certainly a bench player, role player, comes in and is the MVP of the World Series. Talk about the underdog, right? We've been talking about the underdog, man. This guy just rose up and had just an unbelievable World Series. And so salute to Gene Tenace. As we continue in the postseason here, I'll probably mention a few more like Brian Doyle or Bucky Dent. Although Bucky Dent was a really good player, he was an all-star with the White Sox before he came to the Yankees. But Brian Doyle had one heck of a World Series, and you probably never heard that name before. So I'll talk about a few more of those guys over the years that just rose up and had Bernie Carbo would be another name. But anyway, that's my inspiration for today. What do you got?
Well, I have 2 things here. First, when it comes to the playoffs, I think when people look back on the 2022, well, depending on who wins the World Series, obviously, I think one of the things that will be a big distinction is the end of a lot of droughts. The Mariners had the longest drought of any team in all of sports.
Yeah.
21 years not making the playoffs. And even though they didn't score a run in 18 innings, they finally got a home playoff game. And it was electric.
Yeah.
It's always fun to kind of see that the first time in a while.
Yeah.
The Padres, 2006, they actually hosted the ALCS in 2020. But they didn't have their own postseason game since 2006.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, but Jake Peavy threw out the first pitch, game 3 in the NLDS.
Wow. No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So it's really cool to kind of see that, and the San Diego crowd going crazy, and then
Yeah.
also beating the rival Dodgers at their home park, team that won 111 games, one of the highest run differentials in league history. Like, it's just one of those awesome things. And then I think one of the ones that gets overlooked is the Phillies, because like you think of like the 2010 Phillies, and you had Roy Halladay, you had all those other guys that were just like amazing on that team, and they haven't been in the playoffs in 11 years. Citizens Bank Ballpark was rolling.
Yeah.
It's just really awesome to kind of see like those fan bases. Like, I think of like the people that have been rooting for them, the guys that are in the stands every single day, even though there's no hope, but then they finally get to that point where they can watch a playoff game. So, which with both of those, it's been a while since like there's been like not as long of a drought, but now the longest postseason drought is 2014 with the Tigers and the Angels. That was the last time that they both made the playoffs. And I believe the Angels were one and done. I think they lost in the wild card series or the wild card game.
Yeah.
But another story, one of the things that's fun about the postseason is the fact that everything's new. Like, if you look at the scoreboard, your regular season stats aren't on there. It tells you what your postseason stats are.
Right.
And I think one guy that really kind of encapsulates that is one Trent Grisham.
Yeah.
So his regular season, he batted 184, 284 on base, 625 OPS, which is pretty bad. Wow. 17 home runs, 53 RBIs.
Okay.
So far in the postseason, and this is overall, including all 3 series, 286, 412 on base, 607 slugging, so a 1019 OPS. So almost 400 points better.
Wow.
With 3 home runs and 5 RBIs in 28 at-bats.
Wow.
And it's like one of those things where, and even you can also look at Harrison Bader kind of in the same light, where like the regular season kind of seemed a little bit like a wash. And then you get to the postseason and everything changes. And not only is it cool to kind of see like those guys, because like you had mentioned, there's always guys that kind of step up randomly.
Yeah.
But it's also really nice to see guys that like, they're not letting what happened in the past hurt them.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of moving on. So yeah, like it's one of those things where, bad, but that doesn't mean that the future has to be bad too.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I thought Trent Grisham had done better than that in the regular season. I didn't realize that, because he hasn't been a bad ball player. I think he's an excellent center fielder, but wow, he risen up here in this postseason. There's no doubt. He might be this next Gene Tenace or Brian Doyle or, Bernie Carbo, one of these guys. Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. That's awesome. All right. We ready to wrap up?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week, right? And we'll talk more and we'll dive more into the postseason. But for now, this has been Kenny and
Kenny Squared
with the Sports on a Positive Tip podcast. We will talk to you next week.
Yep. See ya.